Welcome to Movie Magic Reviews, brought to you by Megadads. I'm Antonio, joined by my best buddy Clay, and today we're going to talk about the new film, A Quiet Place Day One. And we're going to let you know if it's worth your time, worth your money. Before we begin, just a reminder that we talk spoiler-free in our review discussion here. At the very end, after we warn you, we will talk some very light spoilers after that. But this is a spoiler-free review discussion about the flick. So let's get right into it. So again, we're talking about A Quiet Place Day One. This is actually part 3 in the trilogy, but whatever. It's called A Quiet Place Day One. We're directed by Michael Skarnowski. Written by John Krasinski and Brian Woods and Michael Saransky. Starring Lupita Nyong'o, Joseph Quinn, and Alex Wolff. A little synopsis for you here. A young woman named Sam finds herself trapped in New York City during the early stages of an invasion by alien creatures with ultra-sensitive hearing. Sounds like a can't-miss summer blockbuster. Everybody's going to flock to the theaters for it, I bet, right? Right, Clay? Did you see the first two movies, The Quiet Place?
I did.
Part 1 and
Yep.
2. Okay, you did. What was the subtitle for part 2? It was A Quiet Place, and then it was A Quiet Place, the beginning or something like that. I've only seen the first movie.
It's just part 2.
I loved it. I wanted more of it. I don't know why I didn't end up getting to the second film. But I thought it was really good. Like, me and my family, like, we'd bring that movie up. Just remember that movie, how good it was. Like, this is just something that's on the top of our minds. I love the premise. I thought it was a unique, thing going into it. So I was jazzed to see this. And I'm thinking, okay, I made the mistake of not seeing the second movie, but this is okay. It's a prequel. It's like day one. I'm going to see this. It's the start of the invasion. I won't be lost. And I'm going to be super invigorated to see the second film that I had missed. Like, that's how it was going to go. Spoiler alert, it didn't go that way. Before I get into my pros and cons, let me get your thoughts. What's your background? Were you jazzed?
Yeah, so I watched part 1 and part 2. Loved them both. The first one just even a little bit more of a masterpiece, just because it started it all and kind of set the groundwork for 2. But so excited to see 3. Took my wife with me. She was excited to see it. We loved the first 2. I was a little hesitant going in, just knowing that it was kind of a departure from the original cast. Obviously, John Krasinski was still involved to a varying degree. I don't know how much. I know he's credited in a lot of the stuff, but so that made me feel a little bit better. Like, all right, at least he's still a part of it. But everything I saw in the previews, I was like, it looks good, but doesn't look necessarily fantastic. But so I went in still excited. I mean, we both watched this, you and me both watched this movie a bit late after it had dropped. It wasn't like opening weekend or anything. And so, in fact, when I showed up in the theater, it was just me and my wife in the theater. Not saying that other than just the fact that there wasn't anybody else there. And if you know me, you know that I hate sharing a movie theater with other people if I can help it, because people are annoying and won't stop talking, and it ruins the movie for me. So thankfully, no one was here to ruin the movie for me. The movie just did it by itself. So
yeah, it was that bad. I mean, I don't like to rag on a film, but it had next to no redeeming qualities. I think going in, you're like, okay, we have this, you got to be quiet premise. If you've seen the trailers, if you've seen the previous movies, that would be a minor spoiler that these monsters that have invaded Earth, they can hear even the slightest noise and they react to it. So all the people in a disaster situation, not your typical disaster movie where it could just be, loud and screaming and running and stuff like that. You gotta like creep along and hold your breath, and it's suspense. And that's what the movie has going for it, right? It also, if you're gonna continue as a sequel, but not have any of the returning characters. Same as you. I want a sequel for the fact of oh, I like the characters. I want to see more of the story of them continue. So it didn't have that going for it, having a new, completely separate cast. They didn't handle the premise well. It just I felt like there were not a whole lot of fresh ideas, and I didn't think that they were, you shouldn't have been able to exhaust all the good ideas that you have for that type of setup. It's like, okay, you're creeping around. You have to say, why are people creeping around? What's their motivation for survival? Do you care about the characters themselves? And, what weird, odd situations are you going to be in given the rules of the world? And it fails on all those fronts. So, uh, that's kind of like my big con is like it fails on all those fronts. What are your thoughts? What are the problems for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my biggest problem is this whole movie. I mean, look at the title. It's day one. It's supposed to
Yeah.
focus on that. They do some flashbacks in part two that kind of show those characters day one more or less.
Hmm.
And so you get a little bit of what it was like when things kind of went south, but they don't focus on it too long, but you at least get to see a little bit of it. And so this was their opportunity to explore that more. The problem for me is a lot of what was happening in the background, and they had a whole little sub, the main plot, if you will, was focused around this main character, and then other characters mixed in, but it was just like we didn't really see what day one was like outside of this one person's story. And so I don't know, it's like I get it.
Interesting.
But it was
Hmm.
just like I wanted to know more about the things happening uh globally, or with the lead up to it, and how, I mean, you see stuff falling from the sky, and then from there it just kind of it goes further. But I would have liked to have seen some things leading up to it, but all you see is this main character showing up to the city on a bus, and you're hearing things in the background on TV and other people talking, and so you're getting these little pieces of information of what's happening in the world, but you're not really like a part of it. And so for me, I love the concept of this series, and where these aliens. And so, and granted, I mean, you've seen one alien invasion movie, you've seen them all. There's only so many different ways you can spin that initial story, but I was just missing that. I wanted more of that, and these people weren't really a part of the invasion other than when it finally hit the fan, and all of a sudden they're fighting for their lives or whatever. And so I don't know, it just didn't feel like very day one to me. It just felt like anybody else's story.
Hmm.
And the fact that they kind of figured out the whole "we have to be quiet" thing so quickly, that was something that my wife noticed, and immediately was like, they know really quickly that they need to stay quiet. Like, the girl gets knocked out, she wakes up, and everyone's like, "Shh, be quiet." And it was just like, from then on, all right, be quiet. There wasn't really a process of them having to learn it, in my opinion.
Yeah, very interesting. You bring up a great point. So like the lens of the film is small. It's just this what these characters are seeing, and you never zoom out. I went to the film with my parents. They saw both of the first two movies. They were excited. And then my dad brought up the great point. He's like, it's the third movie now. At a certain point, the allure, like the mystery is gone. So okay, maybe we were going to get a high level, like here's what the government's thinking and doing, and you get very little of that. You don't get any zoom out really, except for a few times of like what's happening. It's more like what they're seeing right in front of them in the streets and stuff. And the scale it's supposed to be like, oh, this is huge, this is big, but you don't even get like too much of that, and it is all like New York centric on this one like island. So it's like, okay, this is what you're gonna go for, fine. And same thing with you. I thought it was weird that the character has to learn the rules of the world. It's like explained to them very quickly, and then they're just like into it. And you would think that that would be a huge part of the day one, is like, oh, they have to like figure out what the enemy's weaknesses are and all of that. And instead it's just literally kind of announced and they skip over which would have been one of the most interesting parts. So I agree with you 100%. The main negative of of all of them is the stakes. I didn't just without spoiling it, the motivation of the characters is so terrible. Like why they're doing what they're doing is god awful. Like if you came up with 100 ideas and ranked them by most absurd and boring, it's literally at the bottom. It's like, why are we gonna go here? And it's like, okay, I kind of get it, but in reality, it's like this kind of took me out of like the stakes are very low. What are my motivations for survival? It's like, well, I really don't have motivations to survive if you really think about it. And it just does away with everything for me. The one thing about the first two movies was I cared about the characters. You know, whenever there's kids involved and families and like the vulnerable, it's like, oh, my heart aches for them. I want to make sure that they survive. And in this one, it wasn't there. It
Right.
was for a moment, they start flirting with the idea of let's give them some characters they're really going to care about. And then they come and they're gone. And I'm just like, what is happening? Why are we here? My dad complained he was a talker through the film, and like a lot of the film is quiet, and he couldn't stop saying how stupid is this like out loud to just us because there weren't many people in the theater. It was like us and like two other people. So it was like it wasn't so good. Any other pros or cons? uh I don't know. I really don't. There's nothing stand out about the movie to me. Like maybe some decent performances, I would say.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I guess the only other thing that really stood out is the flow of the movie and the plot of the movie. Like you said, it lacked motivation, and so when we got to the end of the movie, it didn't feel like the end of the movie. And so when it was over, I was like, okay, I guess we're done. Like I was
Yeah.
expecting another 30 minutes of movie, not by like how long it had been, but just following the storyline and like kind of they had this like one critical moment where this thing happened and then all of a sudden it was like this is the end and they were like, "Oh, okay, I guess that was the big build up that they were leading toward,"
Yeah.
which I wasn't expecting them to like figure out how to kill the aliens and save the world. Like they already kind of hit on that, excuse me, in the first movie and the second movie. Like that more is focused on here's a family who years later after the apocalypse figured out a way to fight back. And so it's like they didn't need to get into that in this one. Like I was okay with that, but it's a tough thing to figure out. How do you do a day one thing where really the upper hand won't switch until way further into the future? So it's like,
Mhm.
how do you end day one and how do you move on? And so it's difficult to land the plane, and I don't feel like they did a great job. There was something that we can hit on in the spoiler part with the main character that I felt like they tried their best to make it kind of poetic and beautiful, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day when it got done I was just kind of like, oh, all right, like I guess that was the end. Like it wasn't super satisfying for me
Uh
personally. So
that's all we really have to say about it, unless you have anything to add. My star
fine.
rating out of 5 stars, I struggle to give it 2 stars. Let me reserve my final judgment. What are you giving it?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it 2 stars.
2 stars?
I don't think
I
it's
struggle to give it 2 stars.
I
I
don't think
want to give it one and a
it's
half.
not bad enough for 1 star. I think
It's
one
not.
star is avoid this
Nope.
movie at all costs. I don't think you necessarily need to avoid this movie at all costs. I think if you're a fan of the first two movies, it's a fine movie to see. I wouldn't pay movie theater prices to go see it. Obviously, it's probably getting near the end of its run. It wasn't a failure by any means. It definitely made back its budget and then some, so it did just fine for itself. I think the actors in it are okay, and I think it brings up some interesting things. I don't know if it does anything super unique from the first two. The whole time I was watching it, I just wanted to go watch the first two,
Yeah.
especially the first one.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the best thing it does is make you want to go watch the other ones just because it's so much better and it kind of reminds you of them a little bit or whatever. But Nowhere close to the experience that the original had, and even in the theater where you want to be quiet and you're sitting there and
Yeah,
you're
I
on your
remember
on the edge
that.
of your seat. I mean, it's kind of lost a lot of that, and so hopefully they've learned from this and realized like maybe we shouldn't keep making these, but you never know with these people. But definitely not a 3 out of 5. I think 2 is a decent score for it. I think it's fair. So
It's a waste of some interesting IP, I think. Like I think this world has more to offer and that you could tell additional stories if you just got somebody creative in there. And instead they went kind of cookie cutter. I don't know who was in this room pitching a couple of these ideas that got through, but you failed your job. I'm so sorry to be so harsh about it. 2 stars and you barely earned them. That's it, everybody. We're gonna move on to some spoilers. The section of the show where we say we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it. Are you ready? So, spoiler warning. You can go ahead and sign off. Thank you for listening. If you're here for the spoilers, if you saw the movie yourself, maybe you just got to talk to somebody about the cat. My family was so upset that this cat made it the whole way. It made no sense. They have this cat with them the whole time that makes zero noise. It gets them into trouble one time, with kind of acting like a cat. But were you mad like I was that this cat lives?
No, in fact,
I was
I
upset.
thought the cat did had the best performance in the whole movie. I was blown away by the cat. But yeah, it kept coming back. But a dog couldn't do that. But I feel like I could see a cat surviving because every time there would be danger, the cat would just bolt out and then like show back up later. And I'm like, that's very like a cat. So I guess I could see that.
I need you to help me. Who's worse? Uh, the Sam, the woman who she's in hospice care, she's sick, she's already dying, and her deciding, okay, I'm gonna get pizza. Or the guy who I have no idea why to this day is following her around instead of trying to escape and save his life. He doesn't have, whatever disease. He's not dying.
Right.
Why? Tell me why. Explain what's happening here. I was so confused.
Yeah, they don't really explain it, nor do they explain his backstory. I kept
Not
waiting
at all.
for like a cut in the movie, and they
Mhm.
would go backwards and show his like side of day one and how
Right.
he ended up in a subway full of water, but they just didn't. Um, there was something along the lines of him staring up when he came out of that water and seeing that cat, and him following the cat that led him to the girl, and it was like he was I don't know if he viewed it as like some kind of sign or what, but for whatever reason, he just felt that he needed to be following her. And their whole
Mhm.
relationship felt so forced. At one point,
Yeah.
he reads a poem that she wrote and he gets all like choked up and emotional about it. I'm like, you don't
Mhm.
know this lady. You just
Mhm.
met her 15 minutes ago
Mhm.
and now you're following her around and you're like upset that she's terminal. And it's just, I don't know. It just, none of it, it all felt forced and quick and just a
Yep.
little weird. I can understand, I can see the argument that when something like that happens, you don't want to be alone, and so you're just happy to be with anybody, and you can just assume that he's a nice guy who's trusting of other people, and so he'd rather stay with her than be alone. But
That's
you're
what my
right,
mom
it's
said.
lacking.
She tried to explain it away to me, just like you just did, saying that his motivation was he was having panic attacks. He was so frightened that he didn't want to be alone. I'm like, okay, still not good enough. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah,
what you came up with.
yeah,
That's what you didn't explain well enough. That's not good enough for a major motion picture, with I mean, I think of the budgets and the people and all the effort that goes into a film of this size. And I just don't think that ideas like that, a script with holes this big should make it out the door. I just don't. Like it didn't make any sense. And I didn't enjoy it.
yep.
The motivations weren't there. And then at the end of the movie, like you mentioned, they escape, could have happened in the first 10 minutes of the movie. If
Right.
they just say, okay, I'm gonna run to that area of escaping the island on the boat, then
Mm-hmm.
they could have just done that. Like, what was stopping them besides making it? Like, nothing. It's
Nothing.
it.
Yeah. So here's some of my thoughts. So this movie opens up by telling you that the main character is going to die. She has terminal cancer. There's no way she's going to survive. So, whether or not she survives the day of the alien attack or not, she's not going. There's no. She doesn't really have a motivation to escape, to
Right.
survive. And so the thing she decides to do is, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to get pizza because it reminds me of my dad. My dad's dead, and I have no reason to live other than maybe to eat pizza one more time. And so that's her motivation. We get that.
I
Then
get it.
him following her doesn't make as much sense. But then at the end of the movie, she just, she turns the music up loud and dies to the aliens, and that's the end of the movie. And so it's like, I don't know, it was just it was an interesting thing that they based this whole character around. Hey, this is a survival moment. It's an alien invasion where humans try to survive so they can live on. But what would it be like if this person didn't really have a motivation to live? What would be their motivation then in an alien invasion? Well, maybe it's to make it to this place where her dad used to play jazz piano and that whole thing. And so it's kind of like her last hurrah while this alien invasion thing is going on. So it's unique. Like, I get it for that reason, and I kind of appreciate it, but it still just didn't completely land, in my opinion.
I I understand what it is. I just don't understand how it won out from any, like, think of the scripts and like the ideas, and everything that hit the floor and like got scrapped. This is what they landed on. And it's not as compelling as it sounds on paper, and I don't think it executed well. The I didn't care. I didn't care only because I knew that deep down she really didn't care. Like,
Right.
not that you don't want to live it. And then it's like, I thought she didn't want to die viciously. I thought about that for a while.
Mm,
You know, I'd rather go slow, kind of the way that I am. This is why I'm taking painkillers, because I don't want to feel the pain. But then it's like, oh, I'm going to get torn apart right now, which is probably going to hurt. So why it's then that goes against the I'm gonna keep taking painkillers because I just can't stand the pain thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't like the flick. I'm glad that I saw it as part of my AMC subscription. So I didn't I have other opportunities to see films and feel like I was exactly losing out on money. But if I would have paid like the standard price, I would have been like kind of upset. I didn't think it was a strong flick.
fair enough.
And the cat, he's in water or not. He's trying to be held above water a few times. And like they're carrying him around like a loaf of bread, like wrapped up. And you're supposed to be like, yep, the cat's in their arms up there. And you could tell it's not a real cat. They're not doing these action like scenes with the cat. So it's just like a bundle of like whatever covered up. And then like, dude, there's no cat in there. Like the immersion is like broken. Like then the cat shows up fine, like a few seconds later, like not freaking out or anything, just kind of like quiet again. I'm like, this cat has like all the chill, I guess. Like it would not break. It was hardly ever scared.
I
Is that how cats are? I'm not around cats that much, but
don't
this
think
cat
so.
was not cat like. It would have been meowing. It would have been like, I don't know. He
Yep.
he gets away and somehow finds like the people like at least twice. Like, I don't know. That's
Yep.
it. That's all I got. Anything else, Clay?
Nope. That's all I got.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Movie Magic Reviews, where we talk about the latest films come to a theater near you. We'll see you next time, everybody. We'll see you.